Welcome to episode 26, the week 3 recap of Flag 4 Discussion. Today is Monday, September 15th. I am your only host today, Jace Hatfield. I'll be doing a solo week 3 recap. Farbode was out of town this weekend for a fun family wedding. We'll hear a lot about that on our next week's show, but we'll be doing a solo recap show today. We're going to be talking about Clemson, Georgia Tech, and what that means for the ACC and the championship odds moving forward. We'll recap Farbode and I's picks over the weekend. And then we're going to talk the two big guns, right? So Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas A&M, Notre Dame. What does that mean for the SEC? What does that mean for Notre Dame's playoff chances? And what are the big takeaways that we have for these four teams moving forward? We're going to start us off with Clemson at Georgia Tech, though. Georgia Tech won in this game, 3.5-point underdogs. If you were not already on the Haynes King train or interested in watching Haynes King, you have to be now. Georgia Tech is one of the more fun teams in the country to watch. Haynes King, potentially the most entertaining player in the country at the moment. We've said it before, and I think it's been proven true time and time again. He is one of the toughest, if not the toughest quarterback in the country. If there was a draft on, I have the ball, 3rd and goal from the 2, and I want a quarterback, I can draft any quarterback in the country. Haynes King might be my first overall pick to go get me that touchdown. It's almost too like, the deeper games go, the more tired he looks, the more he limps on the sideline, the more confident I am that he is going to punch the football in or he's going to get the big first down. He just does not go. He is tough as nails. He had a cool quote. Someone asked him about what brought him to this level of toughness. He said that when he was a kid, his dad would call him a wussy and said that he didn't have the toughness to play at his high school. And he's like, that stuck with me. And I wanted to prove him wrong every single day. And I think he has. I think it's safe to say he's one of the toughest quarterbacks, not only in college football today, but that I have at least personally ever watched. He's an absolute treat. Quick note on Clemson. Farbode and I, we were so wrong about Clemson. We came into the year, we were buying the media Kool-Aid. We were chugging the media Kool-Aid. We were on Clemson national championships, Cade Klubnik Heisman odds. We were buying into that. Clemson does not look good, and Cade Klubnik does not look good. Clemson's got an uphill battle to fight now in the conference. They came into the season as the clear favorite. They were like plus 150 to win the conference coming into the year. Now they're at plus 650, which is third of the odds, and I'll jump into that in a second. But on the other side, you have Cade Klubnik. He's got the DJ Lagway overthrow issue right now. Never a good issue to have. Obviously, if you're short-siding the ball, okay, it just goes in the dirt. That's fine. When you overthrow, you throw it into harm's way. That's how you get the ball into the hands of DBs, safeties over the top. That's when you can put yourself into bad scenarios, causing turnovers or forcing hospital balls to your wide receivers, right? Forcing them to kind of try to lay out or stand up for things, go up and get them, and that's how you can get them laid out there. In that game, too, which I guess it wasn't an overthrow, it was almost a too low underthrow, but his pick in the third quarter, that to me was the big turning point in that game. Clemson had the ball in the red zone. They were down 6. They had a chance to go take a lead, and Cade trying to throw a slant into the front of the end zone. Throws a little too low, picked off at the line of scrimmage. Georgia Tech runs away with it. Fit like literally in the game. That guy ran downfield with it. And that, to me, was a turning point. That was when Georgia Tech, I felt like, had all the momentum. That was when I think Clemson, you could see their heads down on the sideline. That was when Cade Klubnik looked like he was visibly upset with himself. And that's difficult. I think that was probably the turning point in that game. But more importantly than breaking down that game, because I think that game was pretty straightforward of what's the takeaways from what you've watched. But what that means for the ACC, I think, is a lot more interesting of the conversation here. Like I said, coming into the season, Clemson was by far the favorite. They were the media favorite. They were the favorite betting odds-wise. And to the credit of fans, college football fans, I saw so many people on social media, all over the internet, talking about, are we sure? Do we need to pump the brakes on Clemson? A lot of people cited the Georgia game last year and how they fared against the SEC and how they fared in their non-ACC games. And it's looking like they were all absolutely correct. All the fans were correct and to have the brakes pumped there. But it's almost that poor play that they had last year against Georgia, against LSU early in the season. It's creeping in. They struggled to beat Troy last week. They barely take care of business against them. And then they go into Georgia Tech this week and they lose. And they didn't look very good. Cade looks nowhere near the level we expected. Their defensive line, yeah, they have a lot of guys who will probably get drafted high, but they don't look like they're gelling well currently. I should even add that draft stock for those guys could be going down too. But the current ACC betting odds right now are Miami is number one in the country, or number one in the ACC at plus 155. Then you have Georgia Tech at number 2 at plus 400. You have Clemson at 3 at plus 650, followed by Florida State at number 4 at plus 700. And then after that, you get Louisville and SMU just over plus 1,000, and then it drops off pretty heavily. Miami's in the driver's seat at plus 155, and I think rightfully so. They've looked like the best team in the ACC, and one of, if not the best team in the country so far. They looked really good against Notre Dame. They looked really good against a very solid USF team this past week. They dominated that USF game. Their defensive line, especially Ruben Payne Jr., looks like it might be the best defensive line in the country. Mario Cristobal wants to be able to run the ball for big plays behind a beastly offensive line. He has that right now. They have one of the best offensive lines in the country. Mark Fletcher Jr., sure, he might not be Damian Martinez, but I think with this offensive line, the floor of which they can run the football is much higher this year than it was last year. And then similarly, I don't think Carson Beck is Cam Ward, but I think with this good of an offensive line, Carson Beck can produce probably at a somewhat similar floor to Cam Ward, and that's to the credit of Cam Ward, just of how good he was. This offensive line gives you so much hope on offense. They scored 49 points relatively easily against South Florida. They scored a lot of points against Notre Dame. It doesn't look like that's going to slow down. And defensively, this is the best defense they've had in quite some time. Their defensive line was really able to slow down Notre Dame, which you have the three-headed monster of CJ Carr, Jeremiah Love, and Adrian Price. They were able to slow all three of those down against Notre Dame in a rain game. And then the last couple of weeks, we've seen Byron Brown tear apart defenses. He tore apart Florida. He tore apart Boise State. They could not move the ball. They really struggled to move the ball. And I thought when they had the weather delay, because there was like lightning around the stadium, USF came out relatively flat. And that's expected. I mean, it's awkward to play like half a game. And obviously, you get your halftime, but then you come back out and then you have to stop again for however long it was. I believe it was a little over an hour. Miami came out on fire after that weather timeout or the weather delay. That's what good teams do, and I think that's good coaching. I think that's a good football team. So I think rightfully so, they're in the betting driver's seat at plus 155. In terms of what that looks like on paper with the schedule, they play at Florida State and at SMU this season. They have a home game against Louisville, but they don't get Clemson, which I think is big for them. Just because you don't want an angry Clemson team to have a chance to play spoiler maker on you. We'll see if Mario Cristobal can avoid his patent late season crucial loss that knocks him out of the conference championship. It happened to him at Oregon a few times. It happened to him at Miami last year. I think he's going to be fighting hard to avoid that this year. At Florida State and at SMU are probably going to be the season definers for Miami in terms of what you're going to get with an ACC championship, but they absolutely look like a playoff team. In terms of betting at plus 155, I don't know if I love the value there. They are the best team, so I think you can feel comfortable betting it, but I don't know if I love the value that you're getting out of that. Georgia Tech now jumps into second. This was a team Farbode had called out earlier in the season, before the season started, as a team to watch out to win the ACC, in part because he felt not only is this a good team, but they have a really, really favorable ACC schedule. They've already taken care of Clemson, which is huge. They're 1-0. They're first in the conference with that win. They've already gotten rid of their toughest SEC opponent. Their SEC schedule, or their ACC schedule, looks like this. Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, Duke, Syracuse, North Carolina State, Boston College, and Pitt. That means there's no Florida State, there's no SMU, there's no Louisville, and there's no Miami. In order for Clemson to jump them, they would have to lose 2 of those games. I don't see that happening. Georgia Tech has the Clemson tiebreaker now, and I also like their odds to win all those games. If they win all those games, then they're in the ACC championship. Even if they lose one, they might need some luck to happen between Miami and Florida State because they don't get to play them, but they would have the tiebreak over Clemson. So at plus 400, I do like the value. It's one of those games you just want them to get there. Just get to the conference championship, and then you can just bank on Haynes King trying to make you a play or two for you, get you out of the ACC with a championship win. I like the odds at plus 400, and I also think that's well reflective of the situation they're in. They're 1-0. They beat Clemson. They look really good, and they have that very favorable schedule. I like the odds at plus 400 because I think the odds of them playing in that game are really high. And when they get to that game, obviously, I don't think the odds would be plus 400 for them to win it. I think you'd probably get like a plus 1 something, maybe 200, depending on how Miami looks at the time if it's them. Maybe even minus money if they get somebody else that's, if Miami falls apart and Florida State doesn't look as good as they have so far, you could even get worse odds like minus something. So I like what we give Georgia Tech at plus 400. Clemson, they're plus 650. As I mentioned, they're third in the ACC. I don't like the value that we get out of that. 0-1 in the conference. They still have to play SMU. They still have to play Florida State. They do go on the road and play Louisville. I also just don't think they've looked good. Yes, they could very much. I still believe they have a very high ceiling, and they could still turn it around and still look like one of the best teams in the ACC. That's what they're projected to be coming into the season. They haven't looked the part so far. SMU is a good team. Florida State's a really good team. Louisville's a good team. I don't know if I want to bank on Clemson winning all of those games, turning it around. And also, as I mentioned, they don't have the tiebreaker over Georgia Tech. With that schedule Georgia Tech has, they would have to lose 2 of those games to let Clemson leapfrog them. So Clemson's basically trying to cling on and grab what in their mind would be the second spot. I don't think I like that. I think Miami is really good. I think Florida State is really good. Clemson does have Florida State on the schedule, and they do have Louisville, so they have a chance to win some games that can help control their destiny, but they don't have Miami, and that makes me nervous. And the last team I'll talk about here before we move on to breaking down Farbo and I's picks for the weekend and giving you how those went. Florida State at plus 700 is value I like because they control their destiny. They're non-defeated in the ACC at the moment. They have a home game against Miami, which I think is huge, and then they do play at Clemson. Like I said, that game was a lot more daunting week 0 than it is looking now. They control their destiny. If they win one of those games, they put themselves in what should be, assuming they take care of business elsewhere, that puts themselves in a spot to go to the ACC title game. I think that's a really good football team. A Florida State, Georgia Tech, Thomas Castellanos, Haynes King, ACC championship game would be phenomenal. I really hope that's what happens, but at plus 700, I do like the value Florida State brings to the table. Besides that Miami and Clemson game, they have a very favorable ACC schedule, and they've looked really good this year. That's a team that I feel comfortable expecting them to take care of business. My only fear with all of these teams is all of them, other than Miami, look like they could lose to a Pitt or to an NC State. I feel like there's a world where if Haynes King gets banged up enough, not to the point where he's like limping and all of a sudden becomes better, like his wear and tear somehow gets plus stats. There's a world where I think they might struggle, even though that schedule is really easy. So I don't know how much I see that. But North Carolina State, Duke, both those teams have looked pretty good this year. Boston College had a rough loss to Stanford. I thought they looked good against Michigan State. Pitt is no easy out. Pat Narduzzi is not. None of these teams give me confidence like, oh, yeah, I'm guaranteeing that they make it to the conference championship game. Miami's probably the only one I would say that. The reason why I like Georgia Tech at plus 400, I think the schedule is more favorable. Florida State, I think, has the talent to do it. Miami's a really good team, as is playing at Clemson is not going to be easy. There's a world where they go 10-2 and lose those 2 games, and unfortunately they do miss out, which is baked into that plus 700. So if you feel that Florida State can take down Miami at home or take down Clemson on the road, that plus 700 I think is phenomenal value. All right, let's talk a little bit about Farbo and I's picks recap from this past week. So we'll start with our 5 picks of the week. The games that we did number 6 Georgia at number 15 Tennessee. Tennessee was 3.5-point favorites. I rolled with Tennessee. Farbo rolled with Georgia. Tennessee lost that game, but they did cover the 3.5, putting me at 1-0 on the week and Farbo at 0-1. Also, I don't know if you remember, if you listened to the week 3 preview, you might remember this. Farbo and I are on the opposite end of every single game. He had been beating me pretty heavily. He had a 4-game lead on me coming into this week, so I was really hoping to go 5-0. I started off hot. The night games, the mid-afternoon night games didn't do me so well, but I'm up 1-0 on them, Tennessee and Georgia. Again, Tennessee, brutal loss. We'll break down that game more in a little bit here. But Tennessee covered there. Game number 2 is number 16 Texas A&M at number 8 Notre Dame. Notre Dame, 7-point favorites at home. That was the night game on NBC. I had Texas A&M. They covered and won. Farbo was on Notre Dame. They did neither of those things. 2-0 on the week for myself, 0-2 on the week for Farbo. Feeling good. Sounds like I got some momentum. Farbo, he knew when to jump off the train with South Florida. And for that, I have to give him a lot of credit. Game number 3 was number 18 South Florida at number 5 Miami. Miami was 17.5-point favorites. I bought in on Alex Golish and Byron Brown with South Florida in that game. Thought they would cover. They did not. Farbo was on Miami. Miami, as we talked about a minute ago, they looked amazing. And I think that the way that they manhandled Byron Brown in that offense is scary. We know that Mario Cristobal puts together good offensive lines. And we know that they're between Mark Fletcher and Carson Beck, they're going to have a solid offense. If their defense is as legit as it is, you have Ruben Bain who's going to play himself into a top 10 draft pick. I keep saying it, but every week he just looks so good. That's a real Miami team. That team is scary. More than covered that 17.5. They were blowing them out. So 2-1 for myself, 1-2 for Farbode. Game number 4, Florida at number 3, LSU. I was hoping Florida would maybe have a bounce back. I was more so banking on Brian Kelly not getting the job done. LSU covers the 7.5. As I mentioned, I was on Florida. Didn't hit for myself. Farbode was on LSU. They win by 10. LSU covers that game. So now we're both 2-2. The last game of the day for the picks that we had was Vanderbilt at number 11, South Carolina. South Carolina at home, 5-point favorites. Farbode was on South Carolina. Unfortunately for him, they did not cover. And then I was on Vanderbilt. Very smooth win. The cover was never in doubt from pretty early in that game. Diego Pavia looked fantastic. He was a lot of fun to watch. So comfortable. Farbode and I, we'll talk about in the parlay, we had put Pavia anytime touchdown score in our flag for discussion 4-leg parlay because we thought that game would be kind of a shootout. And we thought, okay, Lenore Sellers is going to go toe-to-toe with Diego Pavia. Diego Pavia is going to have to make a hero play, get in the end zone. But they didn't have to. Vanderbilt looked really good. 31-7 win for them. They do cover for me. So that made me 3-2 on the week. Farbode 2-3 on the week. I sit now at a 500, 10-10. So don't fade or tail me. You will lose money most likely either way. And then Farbode is 13-7 now. So he's still doing really well. He had been on an absolute hot streak. Farbode has been positive every single week. So he's gone 3-2 or better. All 3 weeks we've done this so far. Sorry, all 4 weeks so far. We did a week 0-1. So he is now sitting at 13-7. So he's got a 3-game lead there. Hoping to get him back, but I'll keep chipping away. Rome wasn't built in a day. All right, for our shots in the bark. So Farbode came into this week 3 points. He had correctly guessed USF to beat Florida last week, so they got the 1 point for the cover. He had them winning that game outright, and they did, so he got the 3 points for that. Farbode was on Texas State this week. Texas State was 14.5-point underdogs at Arizona State. I was thinking Arizona State had just lost to Mississippi State. Last year, these two teams played. Arizona State struggled to win. It was a 31-28 game last year. Farbode was on Texas State, but I think unfortunately for him, he got an angry Kenny Dillingham, and I think in the good way for Arizona State, an angry Kenny Dillingham. Arizona State looks much better than they had so far this year. Looks like the team that we know and love. Sam Levitt looks good. Jordan Tyson looks really good. Texas State did not cover. That leaves Farbode at 3 points. All right, my dog was Stanford on the road or at home, 12.5-point favorites against Boston College. It was a 10:30 p.m. kickoff. My logic was more so I don't think Stanford's good. I just think Boston College is going to be a late kickoff for them. Back-to-back road games for them. They traveled they played Michigan State on the road last week. Then they got to go all the way out to California to play Stanford this week. Plus that Michigan State game for them was a 40-42 overtime kind of game. I was hoping to catch them on a week. And I did. Stanford came out with a win, so that's huge. I got the 1 point for the cover. I got the 2 points for the win. That brings me up to 5 points on the year. A subtle brag, all 3 of my dogs have at least covered. Stanford finally got me the win. So I sit up 5 points there. Farbode 3 points on our shots in the bark. Last recap point here, flag for discussion parlay. We hit last week. We're 11-16 on legs. We're 1 of 3 on our parlays. We had Duke money line. Unfortunately, that did not come out on top. Really good game. I don't have the breakdown in that game, but for those of you who watched it, Darian Mensah looked really good again. Similar to the Illinois game, I still think that Duke's going to struggle to win a lot of games when they're throwing the ball 50-plus times a game. It sets you up poorly because, 1, time of possession. 2, you throw your defense, you run the risk of throwing your defense out on the field back to back to back. If you go in and you throw 3 straight incomplete passes and you punt, you force your defense to sit for maybe 5 minutes and then get back on the field. And then on the flip side, Tulane played a great game. Jake Retzlaff looked really good for them. He was good in the air. He was really good on the ground. And a similar story. Once he got moving, Duke's defense was out on the field for what felt like the entire second half. They go 3 and out, back on the field. Jake Retzlaff was running all over them. They looked gassed. They looked tired. But Duke made a good fight. It was if you look at the box score, pretty even game on paper all the way through. I think it was Tulane's ground game and their defense that made the difference. I think Duke needs to figure out a run game if they're going to start winning more games this year. But they're fun to bet on because they air the ball out a lot, and Darian Mensah is fun to watch. Unfortunately, Duke didn't get done for us, though. We were on Texas A&M plus 7.5. That did hit. Was pretty comfortable. We were feeling good about it most of the way through, especially at the end. They even came out on top, but Just needed the 7.5 from them. Don't need to go into details. We talked about it, but we had Diego Pavia anytime touchdown. Did not hit. We were hoping for it, but comfortable win for Vanderbilt. They didn't need him to make a play with his legs like that. And then last leg, didn't really matter, but Cal money line, that did hit. They took down Minnesota at home in the late night game. JKS, he is the real deal. When he had committed to Oregon and then decommitted, not even decommitted, he committed to Oregon, signed with Oregon, then hit the transfer portal like that a month later, right after signing day. He wanted playing time, and I thought, really, a true freshman quarterback, you're really going to look for playing time that quickly? He's proven me wrong. I think he's proven a lot of people wrong. He looks phenomenal, and Justin Wilcox has Cal rolling. They look good. I like the direction that they're headed in. I don't think they're going to be an ACC championship competitive team, but I think this is a much better team than people realized. I think they're headed down a good path. It'll be interesting to see in the offseason. A good topic will be, was JKS going to stick with Cal and ride them out, or is he going to try to look for a transfer up? But he looks like the real deal. Cal money line, pretty comfortable there. Minnesota struggled to throw the ball. And when Cal was up, Minnesota just struggled to get back into that game. All right, the meat and the potatoes of the show here. We've got Georgia at Tennessee. We want to break that game down. And then we're going to get to Texas A&M at Notre Dame, and then we'll wrap it up. But let's start with Georgia at Tennessee. Absolute gutting loss for Tennessee fans. My man Will, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry. All love. I was all in on the Vols. I was with Purdue fans. I was the only one rooting for the Vols, but I was doing it for you. I'm sad they couldn't get it done. It was Georgia 44, Tennessee 41, OT game in Neyland, in Knoxville. We'll start with UGA here. We'll start with the winning team. Gunnar Stockton, I think, proved a lot of people that he is that dude, right? That he looked tough as nails. I was certainly one of the many people who wasn't sure as a passer if he was polished or ready to go win a game like this, especially when they got down going into the second half. I didn't know if I truly didn't know if Gunnar Stockton was going to have what it takes to get Georgia back in this game, and I liked where Tennessee was at in this game. Gunnar Stockton proved me wrong. He looked really good. He was 23 of 31, 304 yards, 3 total touchdowns. But I think the big story there is Georgia's O-line just got better and better and better as the game went on. Same thing with their defense. The defense especially. Joey Aguilar started that game 14 of 14, 213 yards, 2 touchdowns. I believe the stat is he was the first quarterback in the SEC to do that in the last 20 years. They're starting a lot of young defensive backs. That's a Kirby Smart defense. We should know this, that they're going to figure it out. I didn't think it'd be that same game, though. But after that 14 of 14 start for Joey Aguilar, he ended up going 10 of 22, 158 yards. Did still have 2 touchdowns, but he also had 2 interceptions in that span. Young defense, but Kirby really got the defense to settle down. And as that game went on, Georgia, it was that third quarter, and I'll talk more about that when I get to Tennessee. That third quarter was a big turning point in that game. I thought Georgia's defense played a huge part in that. And that's what set the tone for fourth quarter and OT, which just kind of felt like the game was slipping out of Tennessee's hand at that point. And a lot of credit of why it felt that way was because of Georgia's defense. Georgia offense, too, high leverage situations. They were 8 of 17 on third downs. They were 2 for 2 on fourth downs. Like I said, dominant O-line. The run game was dominant. Gunnar Stockton was playing a great game. It just felt, by the fourth quarter, when you could feel it slipping, it felt like they were unstoppable. Every third down it felt like Georgia was going to get. Going for it on fourth downs, it felt like they were just going to get it. And they did. They looked really good. Once the UGA offense got momentum in that fourth quarter is when it started to feel inevitable. That 9-play, 75-yard, game-tying drive, touchdown drive, that was when I was like, oh, no. If Tennessee doesn't win it here in regulation, they go to OT, I felt like they were screwed. And everyone, you could kind of feel the presence of where, we were with friends. You could feel the presence if that's where it was going. Farbode and I were hesitant on Georgia this year, and I'll touch on it here, and I'll touch on it again in the implication section of this. But we were hesitant. We actually didn't put them, either of us didn't put them in our playoff bracket. We should have never doubted Kirby Smart. That was our big mistake. Should have never doubted Kirby Smart. He's always going to find a way to win big games. He's a phenomenal coach. This game is not the kind of game Georgia ever wants to play. Like, Georgia's never going to be trying to get into a 44-41 overtime shootout game where they're trying to take down a team who's built to win shootouts. They still won that game, and that's scary. Because once Georgia settles in the defense, the young DBs start to figure it out. Gunnar Stockton's going to keep getting better. Once they start playing Georgia football, if they're winning Tennessee football, shootout football, when they get playing Georgia football, it's going to be scary. And they have a pretty manageable schedule this year. Because the SEC, you're going to have to play tough games. You're going to play ranked teams. But they do avoid the Florida-esque gauntlet this year, which I think is huge. All right, Tennessee. Man, I felt like they lost this one. I think if you're a Tennessee fan, you felt like it slipped through your hands. You felt like you should have had it. Now, the most obvious talking point of this game, I think, in terms of why it felt like they lost it, was the missed field goal at the end of regulation. 43-yarder to send the game over, send you home with the win, and he misses it. But right before that field goal happened, there was a false start on Tennessee, taking from a 38 to a 43-yarder, which is, that matters. Those 5 yards matter. It matters for distance and the psychology of it. But even more importantly, I actually think that messes with the mentals of your kicker, right? You're almost like icing your kicker. He's mentally prepared himself for the kick at this moment. He goes through all the preparation. I'm sure he's got a very, here's my pre-kick routine. And you get the false start. Now he's got to reset again. Okay, now you got to get yourself back into the position. Now you're a little bit further. You're on a new spot in the field. You got to do your routine again. It's almost like you ice your kicker when you get yourself in that field goal. That false start, that just cannot happen. You cannot have false starts like that when you're kicking a game-winning 38-yard field goal. I actually thought Heupel had a really good final drive, taking away all the clock, still moving the ball down the field, gave his kicker what should have been a 38-yard chance to win. Unfortunately, there's nothing Josh Heupel can do about a bad false start and a bad kick. If you notice the hold, football was kind of slanted back a little bit, slanted back right, which the kicker's going to get a lot of hate. And the reason why I call that out is because I hate when kickers get a lot of hate when you see a hold like that and the hold wasn't great. It's hard to, if you've ever kicked a field goal, I'm not a great kicker by any means, but I've tried it before. It's hard to kick it if the ball is slightly off-centered. That looked like it happened for him. Unfortunate loss for Tennessee. But the bigger storyline of why I think when that game starts slipping away and why I think it lost, and I don't know if people will talk about this as much. Coming out of the half, Kirby Smart had a much better adjustment situation and outcoached Josh Heupel in that third quarter. Coming out of the half, Georgia starts off with a touchdown. Tennessee punts it, Georgia punts it, Tennessee throws a pick, and then Georgia goes down and gets a field goal. It didn't feel like it was a massive change in the game, especially with the score, but that was a 10-point swing in that game where the 3-and-out by Tennessee followed by the interception. That is the epitome of Georgia's running the ball really well. Now your defense is out on the field, what feels like the entire third quarter. They're getting tired. Georgia's starting to establish the run. Gunnar Stockton's playing with a lot of confidence. And when you're in a 44-41 overtime game, you need your defense to be rested. And I think that was the start of, oh man, it looks like Georgia's run game is just going to take over this game. And then when you get to OT, sure enough, the first carry of OT, Georgia takes it down inside the 10. It was just, that to me is that third quarter was the turning point of, okay, Tennessee looks like they're on top of this game, and then all of a sudden they're going to take over and they're going to win this thing. And that's what happened in Georgia's favor there. I'll get into some bright notes, though. I don't want to be all down on Tennessee. I thought they played a phenomenal game, a game that they should have won. They absolutely should have won. Joey Aguilar is the real deal. I would have to imagine that this is probably the biggest game he has played in to date in his career, at least in terms of atmosphere, energy, the expectations, the hype, the realness of the game. And I thought he delivered. He threw 2 picks. One of them wasn't really his fault. Wide receiver slips. The one before the half, I absolutely thought was a bad decision. They had just under 2 minutes, chance to go down the field. And as we know, 3 points would have mattered a lot. Chance to go down and get some points. He took a deep shot into double coverage, which I didn't love. Georgia came down with it. That's teachable, right? You can learn from that, especially Joey Aguilar. He's an older quarterback. He's experienced. That's something he'll learn. Heupel's a good coach. He'll grow from that. But outside of that interception, I thought he played a dang near flawless game. Starting out 14 for 14, you don't just luck into that and put up those kind of numbers in your first 14 throws against Kirby Smart. That's not luck. That's not random lucky plays. There were a couple plays where you're like, oh man, that did go in his favor, but it was 14 to 14. It's not like there was 14 lucky plays. I thought he was the real deal. And then even more of a real deal, Chris Brazzell Jr. looks like the real deal. That kid is an absolute beast, 6'5" wide receiver. He's a true elite playmaker, and he's going to be one of the better wide receivers in the SEC. And as long as you have that guy on the field with Joey Aguilar, I like the Tennessee offense. I like where they're going. Their offensive line's solid. The run game's been complimentary. I don't think it wasn't quite as good against Georgia as we've seen earlier in the season. obviously that makes a lot of sense at Georgia. The run game's been good. I think the Tennessee offense is going to be phenomenal all season. Offense is going to be good enough to win big games, should allow them to avoid, knock on wood, any small upsets. I like what we saw to Joey Aguilar. I really like what we got out of Chris Brazzell Jr., 3-touchdown game. And I like the run game. I think the offense is going in a good direction. The defense has played really well this year, and they played well, I thought, at points in this Georgia game. Like I mentioned, I think the defense got tired in the second half. It was that third quarter that I really think wore down the Tennessee defense. And once they were tired and Georgia started getting momentum on the ground game, it got ugly for them a little bit. And you started to lose hope that they were going to be able to stop them in OT if it came to that. They have a bright season ahead of them. I think Joey Aguilar is going to have to learn to you don't need to hit a home run every single play in every big moment against these good SEC schools, like the interception he threw right before half. And then defense, I think the defense is going to have to pick it up a little bit. But overall, I like where Tennessee's at. I'm not nervous about them. I'm not off on them. I think they have a bright season ahead of them. We'll get into the implications of this game a little bit. I don't know if I see Tennessee as an SEC champion after this game. I think that was probably one you needed to have just in terms of logistics of getting into the SEC championship game. They don't have an awful schedule, but it is pretty difficult. Georgia is now the new SEC championship favorites, though, at plus 260. Tennessee drops down to plus 3,000. So Vegas also doesn't love where Tennessee sits in that SEC light. You have Georgia at the top at plus 260. That followed by Texas, LSU, and Alabama. All three of those are very close and clumped together, not far behind Georgia. I don't know if I love what I've seen out of Texas and LSU so far, and I don't know if I have a lot of confidence on them to turn it around, especially what I've seen out of Georgia. Bama's an interesting team. They've shown flashes where they look really good, but also you look at the Florida State game. They look terrible in that game. And Florida State was a team, yes, they're probably really good, but by no means should a team that went 2-10 the year prior kick your butt like that week one, especially if you're Alabama and you have the talent that you do. So if you like Georgia and you like the value at plus 260, that could be a decent play for you. I don't know if the SEC, I don't think I'm going to touch. I don't know much. Like I said, I don't know how I feel about Texas or LSU. I don't know how I feel about Alabama. I would need to see one of those three teams win a big game or two and prove me wrong. I almost think it would be more fun to try and get a flyer on like Ole Miss or someone like that, even though the odds are going to be in your favor. The odds of it actually happening are going to be low, but that's why those two things exist. But Georgia, the new SEC champ favorites, they look the part. They're a young team, young quarterback, young defense. It's Kirby Smart. This team's only going to get better and scary as the season goes on. An oversight on Farbode and I, just forgetting about Kirby Smart and what he can do as a coach. I think that this was a good reminder to the SEC of, yeah, hey, I'm Kirby Smart. Don't forget who I am. And that's kind of what that game felt like. All right, last breakdown here, last part of the recap. I want to talk about Texas A&M at Notre Dame. Texas A&M takes down Notre Dame in what was an awesome finish. Texas A&M wins 41-40, end of regulation, went down the field and scored a touchdown right before time expired. With a little bit of a help on a 3rd and 16 defensive holding call. Was defensive holding, was a little soft potentially. But it was KC Concepcion. That's what, when you have KC Concepcion, Mario Craver, and Marcel Reed, you play football to make big plays, and those guys play to make big plays. And they draw things like holding calls, and that's going to happen. Brutal beat by Notre Dame for Notre Dame fans. The biggest story here is going to be the breakdown about what this means for Notre Dame moving forward. But I'll start with Texas A&M. Mike Elko gets his first big statement signature win as a Texas A&M Aggie. Took down Marcus Freeman, who had beat him in their 2 previous matchups coaching against each other. I think this is going to be one of the better Texas A&M teams that we've seen in quite a while, not only in terms of talent on the field. I mentioned the 3 big playmakers that they have, but also with, I think, Mike Elko as a coach. I think this is the best Texas A&M team we have seen as a country in the last few years. This feels like this could be the game for them that takes them over that hump. All right, they always get clowned for going 8-4. They always get clowned for never being able to win big games. They're hot on the recruiting trail. They've had a big recruiting for 2026. They're going to be big. I can guarantee it. They're going to have good portal players coming in. They're a well-funded program. And wins like this are what takes you to the next level. This is why they brought Mike Elko in. This is what he was looking for, right? I think he knew Duke didn't have probably the resources or the ability to give him some big program like what Texas A&M can. And I like where they're at. I thought something that Texas A&M did in spite of winning, or even though they won, they had committed 13 penalties. yes, that's really rough. You don't want to be a team that's committing 13 penalties. But that's something that to me is penalties are something that are very fixable to me. And Mike Elko's being a great coach with a team that has a lot of talent, I think those penalties are more than fixable. And if you're winning games at Notre Dame with 13 penalties, I'm excited to see what the ceiling is for a team like Texas A&M as they move forward. Their odds to win the SEC are plus 1,200. I think it's a very attractive line for a team that looked as good as they have. They're 3-0, big statement win. They enter a bye week this upcoming week, and then they get Auburn at home coming out of the bye. Jackson Arnold looked all right this past week. That's a team they'll be favored in. They should win. That would get them to 4-0 with 2 ranked wins. Mike Elko, Texas A&M, I think they're in a great spot. They're down a good path. They have Casey Concepcion, Mario Craver, and Marcel Reed are going to be some of the best three-headed monster duos in the country. Three-headed duos doesn't make any sense, Jace. Three-headed trios in the country. I'm excited to see how that plays out for them. But I have a lot of faith on where this team's going. Their defense was solid against the run. I know they gave up 40 points. But between C.J. Carr, Adrian Price, and Jeremiah Love, Notre Dame can run the ball. And I actually thought they fared pretty well. Notre Dame averaged 4.5 yards a carry. When Notre Dame has those 3 guys who can run the ball the way that they can, yeah, you get 40 points, but I actually thought defense played pretty well. Offensively, interesting stat line from Marcel Reed. A lot of incompletions, a lot of big plays. They seem like a team to me that's going to rely on Craver and Concepcion making big plays, Marcel Reed making big plays with his arm and his feet. That makes for really entertaining football to watch. And I think this was actually the style of football Elko was trying to play at Duke with Riley Leonard. I just don't think he had enough help outside of him to play this to its full extent. You saw it here with Notre Dame. Incredibly fun football to watch, and it's football that can allow you to beat anybody in the country, right? If these 3 guys are clicking and they're playing well, you could beat anybody. But also on the same note, if they're not playing well and they're not clicking, or somebody has a good game plan for 1 or 2 of these guys, you have the ability to lose to teams you probably shouldn't. And then obviously to good teams that are well coached, like a Georgia team. But at plus 1,200, I do kind of like the odds of what I see there. And then for Notre Dame, it's tough. This game and the Miami game, you feel like you just had them. Notre Dame is a couple really brutal plays away. And when I say brutal, it's just unfortunate plays away from being 2-0 and being a top 5 team in the country. People talking about as potential national champion favorites. Instead, they fall short on those two games. They're 0-2. Now, I think they're in a position where they need to win out if they want to make the college football playoff. You lose your 2 big shots early in the year. I don't think they have a strong enough schedule moving forward to drop one of those games. Their 2 most high-profile games left are going to be at Arkansas September 26th, and then they get USC at home on October 18th. They're probably going to have to win. They are going to have to win both of those games to give themselves a good enough resume. They don't have the conference championship path to get in, so it's going to have to be by an at-large bid. They're going to have to win out. That would put them at 10-2, and like I said, their marquee wins would be Arkansas and USC at home. I don't think they have enough juice in that schedule to make up for that. And if they lose any of the games remaining on their schedule, 9-3 with the losses that they would incur with the lack of big wins, no shot at a college football playoff for them. Or they would need something unbelievably ridiculous to happen with the rest of the country. But there's a lot of teams playing good football right now, so I'm not sure I like where they're at to sit with the college football playoff, which is unfortunate because I think this team is better than 0-2, and I think this team is good enough to be a playoff team. I don't think they're going to have the chance to show that. C.J. Carr is playing better ball than I expected from him. We knew he could run the ball, and you could kind of get the sense that he was a gamer the way he was playing in that Miami game, the confidence, the fire he showed on some rushing touchdowns. He was throwing the ball really well, I thought, in this game. Texas A&M's pass defense was a little spotty at times, but I thought he was playing well. They have a real weapon in Eli Raridan, the tight end. I believe he's like 6'7". He looks like a beast out there. You know what you're going to get out of Love and Price as well, right? You're going to have this 2-headed monster backfield. You know what you're going to get out of them. They're going to be consistent and good every game. I think the issues that Notre Dame has is twofold here. Number one, their offensive line is not playing well enough to allow their running backs to take over games. I feel like both Love and Price, they're averaging 4 to 5 yards a carry in that game. That's good. That's really good. But when you have guys that good, you expect, when you have guys with that much talent, you expect 6 or 7 yards a carry, and the ability to dominate and take over a game, especially Notre Dame. We're used to these amazing offensive lines that allow them to get up in games and then just maintain the lead because of time of possession. I don't know if they have the O-line play that's quite done that yet. Granted, they've played two really good teams. Like most teams in the country right now have had the chance for some tune-up games. Unfortunately, Notre Dame just hasn't had that tune-up opportunity quite yet. They jump into a Miami game, they jump into a Texas A&M game. The O-line play hasn't been bad by any means, but I don't think it's up to the Notre Dame standard that they expect, especially when this is a team with as good running backs that they have and aspirations of winning a national championship. The other thing I think this team's going to need to work on is going to be the wide receiver position. I think they're going to need an outside playmaker to step up and become a go-to guy for CJ Carr, for Notre Dame when they need a big play. Because right now it's running backs and your tight end, which is great. Those are all great players. They're all phenomenal. But it's convoluted. It's all at the line of scrimmage. It's all short. It's all, it's not quite as much, speed or spread ability with a running back or with a tight end that you might get with an elite wide receiver playmaker. And I think if Notre Dame's going to want to go 10-2, and they're going to have to go 10-2 to make the playoff, and they're going to have to prove, they're going to have to blow out one of Arkansas or USC, and they're going to have to blow out a lot of the lesser teams that they play. And a good way to do that is an elite playmaker on the outside. They're going to need somebody to step up and do that. Defensively, it was an interesting game. I actually thought the defense played well. You look at the box score; they gave up 41 points. They had the block punt that Texas A&M had for a touchdown, which, by the way, elite teams find edges in games. Look at Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and Dan Lanning. All those coaches have said so many times about how important it is to find every edge possible, and a lot of coaches forget special teams is the time to get edge. If you remember the Nick Saban Alabama days, the amount of games it felt like they were going to lose, and somehow, they return a kickoff for a touchdown, then they block a punt somehow. It's just they felt like they always made these crazy special teams plays when they needed them most. Texas A&M did that, but obviously that's not the Notre Dame defense, right? And it's like I said, it's Marcel Reed, it's KC Conception, it's Mario Craver. They're going to score points, and I thought that the defense played well as a whole. Really, the brutal 3rd and 16 holding call, just unfortunate some timing for that. The defense played good enough to win that game. Special teams needs to get cleaned up. That penalty was really difficult. You've got to clean stuff like that up. I thought the defense played well enough to win that game. That wraps it up for episode 26, our week 3 recap of Flag for Discussion. I appreciate you hanging out with me. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. I've had a lot of fun doing the solo shows, but I do miss Farbode. You're going to get a Farbode solo show for not only the week 4 preview, but the week 4 recap. I'll be out of town for the next week doing a little bit of travel, but it'll be a lot of fun. I'll miss you all. I'll be submitting my picks to Farbode. I'll probably give him some blurbs about what I'm picking and why. I'll let him share that all with you. But look forward to hearing back from him on Thursday. And as always, thank you for your engagement on social media. We absolutely love it. It means the world to us. It helps us grow. It's also a lot of fun for us. On TikTok, we are flagged4discussion. On Twitter /X, we are F4discussion. Instagram, we don't have that one yet. Sorry, I wrote that one down. It's a bad copy and paste error on my end. YouTube, we are Flagged for Discussion. Spotify, Apple, Podbean, wherever you get your podcasts, we are Flagged for Discussion. Thank you for tuning in. This has been Flagged for Discussion.